This may be very anticlimactic because there's nothing about sex in my talk today. There's an expression for that kind of teasing, so I apologize. Welcome to Bodhi Spiritual Center. Oh, beloved, take me. Liberate my soul. Fill me with your love and release me from the two worlds. If I set my heart on anything but you, let fire burn me from inside. Oh, beloved, take away what I want. Take away what I do. Take away what I need. Take away everything that takes me from you. That is a sacred mystical poem written by the Sufi mystic Rumi. Oh, beloved. Many traditions refer to the beloved as God. And given what is occurring on the planet right now, I really struggled with what it was that I thought we should talk about this morning. Because we are in week 3 of a series titled Sacred Sexuality. And the idea, the premise of the series is that we liberate ourselves from the confines of a framework of what sexuality is. And if you remember, in the first 2 weeks, we defined sacred sexuality as bringing the divine to an aroused state, to invoke an aliveness in all we do. And so I'm going to try to create some context for what I believe is happening spiritually on the planet right now, because I need that, and I hope it's of service to you. And what I know is that somehow, some way, it's related to sacred sexuality. The way I think it's related is that there are those things that exist on the planet that we've had an unwillingness to talk about. Sex, sexual energy being one of them, violence being another of those, the pursuit of profits over all else. We don't like to talk about it, but it's in the space. And so there's something that is occurring in the consciousness of humanity that we're being invited to confront right now. And I sent out an email to our board this week, and I asked them, what is it that you want to hear from your spiritual community in the wake of significant levels of tragedy? What is it that you want to hear? And your board, your core council, had an incredibly thoughtful and provocative email conversation about this. So I first and foremost want you to know that there are a body of human beings, 8 human beings, that have devoted themselves in very significant ways to the conversation that we curate and cultivate here at Bodhi Spiritual Center. And it doesn't just happen for any of our community members on a Sunday morning. It is an alive, dynamic conversation that is occurring all the time. The great suffering that exists in the human experience is that which gets created by the lie of separation. It all goes back to one fundamental belief, that we are separate. And when we orient a society that is based on separation, it is inevitable to have destruction be at the forefront. So I want to just point out a couple things. You know, I don't like to talk about Black history in the month of February because it's Black History Month. It just sort of irritates me in the same way that I don't like to talk about queer folks in June because it's Gay Pride Month. So I almost resist quoting people of color in the month of February. But a couple of years ago, we declared as a community that we were going to stand for the existence, the revelation of the beloved community. And I like to remind us what that is and why it existed. It was a concept that was birthed by a theologian named Josiah Royce. And his premise, most of his work is cataloged at Stanford. The premise of his work is that if humanity does not have something greater than themselves to pour themselves into, they devolve into their own neuroses. Now, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King then took the concept of the beloved community and really popularized it. And it was one of his primary platforms, the beloved community, the realization of the beloved community where all of humanity can share in the wealth of the earth, where we come to know one another through this thing called agape love, a transcendent love. He said that there were triple threats of evil. Racism, broadly described as that which includes anti-Semitism, homophobia, and it's a very wide description of racism. Poverty, and the third, which we don't talk a lot about, but it is one of the most highly invested areas of our federal budget, militarization. So, folks, you today are living in a militarized society. That's the state of things. When I was growing up, there were not police all over my school campus. Now I drop my children off at school, and they're greeted by off-duty cops. And I remember seeing that for the first time. It really bothered me. Now I understand it's a complex issue, and we have the experience of wanting to create safety. But I am an expert in the field of consciousness. I am not an expert in the field of policy. I hope to give my life to the field of consciousness such that people who hear my voice take the application of consciousness into the field of policy. That's why I exist. So I'm not going to talk to you about what policies need to occur. I am going to talk to you, though, about the consciousness in back of what we are experiencing on the planet. There is a consciousness of fear. It is a psychosis. When you walked in today, you were given a booklet. It is our commitment for 2018. On the first page of that booklet, it declares the purpose of this community explicitly to disrupt the psychosis of fear. That's why this community exists. Remember that idea, reveal love? It is not some limp, listless idea. This is a time of fire. Rumi said, if I set my heart on anything but you, beloved, let fire burn from inside of me. What is that? He is talking about the sense of separation. He says here, release me from the two worlds, duality. Release me from the idea that there is something separate from me. And that is not something that can be contended with a listless, limp love. That is something that is fierce, it is fiery, and it lives in you to the extent that you are willing to allow it. What happens when a fire begins to go out? What do you have to do? Stoke it. You don't let it unless you're ready for the fire to burn out. There is an apathy that exists in the consciousness of humanity that, thank God, the use of technology is provoking. What is different about this particular shooting event that has happened in the past week? What's different? Everyone who documented it was under 21. I have a duty as the leader of the spiritual community, as someone who is deeply devoted to getting this conversation out onto the planet, to document much of my life. I'm supposed to be taking pictures, and we have an application. I upload those pictures, and I write copy. It is a conscious practice for me. I will leave like a really hot spot in a really amazing situation. I'll be like, damn, I didn't document it. If you're under 21, that doesn't exist. If you're under 21, it's the first thing you grab. So there were kids in there that were documenting because it was the first thing they knew to do. To tweet, to chat, to text. Thank God. Want to know why? Because it forces folks to wake the F up. This is not dissimilar from what we have seen in the last few years around police brutality. It's not like all of a sudden in the last 3 years there's been more police brutality. No, folks are documenting it in new ways that require you and I to stop turning a blind eye. Now, there's a spiritual principle that says turn entirely away from the condition. And we teach that spiritual principle. But what it means to turn entirely away from the condition means to know that condition as false, not to not look at it. What that principle means is look at a thing and get in back of the thing. All right, so this came up. Apparently, Ernest Holmes, who died in the 60s, is still tweeting, and he said it like this. He said, to every problem in my world, I now speak the truth. I say of these that they are insults to the God-given intelligence within me. I now take dominion over my consciousness. I am in control of my world, and I release God into it until there is nothing to see there but good. Look, this came up. This came up in my Twitter feed, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" I was really in something. It was Tuesday morning, and I was just confronted by something, and I couldn't get it out of my space. And I came out of meditation, and I said to Nathan, like, "Man, I feel bound up by this thing." And then I saw that on Twitter, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is what I needed. He says, I say of these, they are insults to my God-given intelligence. These world of problems are insults to you as a divine being on the planet. He says, I now take dominion over my consciousness. And I always have it, like I see these guys, and by the way, today is Audre Lorde's birthday. So, I have these figures, and I see them in my being and in my body, and I hear Ernest Holmes going like this, I am in control of my world. It's like, I am in control of my world. I put God consciousness into that thing. Can you imagine if you were walking on the planet and something comes up in your world of affairs and it isn't as you desire it to be? It isn't the holiest and highest expression of life that is intended of and for you on the planet? And instead of being taken out and taken down, you go up against that thing and you say, God consciousness, get that out of the way. Come on now. Who would you be? So we come together to practice because when I'm by myself, I forget. I will likely never be the spiritual leader that when something happens in the world of form, I'm barking right away. I get real quiet. When something like Parkland happens, I get real quiet. Because number one, I don't have a desire to add to a bunch of noise. I'm trying to get still and listen. What is going on here? What is the spiritual truth of what is occurring here? What is the dis-ease in consciousness that is occurring on the planet that is providing these results? Because here's the thing. The universe is impersonal. I can't ever get with this idea that... I get real tripped up when we say God is loving. No, God is love, period. You and I are loving or not. The law, the universe is impersonal. It's formulaic. It's mathematical. You put into it a realm of beliefs, and it outpictures in a world of form. So we have a dis-ease of the mind. If you look at the discretionary budget for the United States of America, and this is consistent, this isn't like new to this administration, so get that for a minute. 55% of the budget is spent on military, the Defense Department. The next largest category is veteran affairs at 7.4%. The next largest category is education at 6.2%. Let me just repeat that. In the discretionary budget, the federal budget that you and I participate in, 55% of discretionary funding goes to the Defense Department. This is not a political statement. It should be politicized. It's consciousness. If the vast majority of your resources go to being in a defensive state, you're creating a world. And the world will be commensurate with that. If your time, your talent, and your treasure is invested in being on the defensive, and that requires a consciousness of fear, there's something out there that can get me. Some of you saw a Facebook interaction I had with my brother yesterday. And my brother comes here, and I love my brother. My brother lives 6 blocks away from me. He and I have been one another's ride or die, for sure. But we have very different perspectives on guns. And we got into a debate, and you can go look it up if you are looking for some drama. It's out there. And I felt myself getting really inflamed. And I felt myself going deeper and deeper and deeper. And there was a part of me that was getting increasingly addicted to being right about my perspective. And I got to the point in that conversation where the thought crossed my mind, I don't want to be in relationship with him. I cannot have this in my life. We see the world way too differently. I don't want this relationship in my life. And I was like, wow. That's with someone who I said was my ride or die, and that's what happened. So if that can happen with one of the closest people to me, it should be no surprise of how it plays out on a national scene with people that have no context for love with one another. So in that moment, I knew I have to get up. I was laying in my bed. I had my robe on. I had my slippers on. And that's usually what I do on Saturdays before I speak. I just sort of burrow in. And I have stacks of books around me. And I go deep down a rabbit hole. And instead of that, I got seduced into this lie of separation. And I met my brother at the consciousness that creates the dysfunction. I didn't transcend the consciousness into a new idea of what could be possible. I didn't show up to my brother with curiosity. I didn't show up in inquiry. Why do you love your gun so much? I came in with a point of view, with an opinion, with a righteousness, with a smartness about me, and very little became possible. Fortunately, I had the presence of mind to get up, and I went to an event, and it was an event that was oriented around people's creativity, their expression on the planet as musicians, and I knew that I needed something to recalibrate me. I have access to that mental awareness, to that field of consciousness, and I get tripped up. That's what we're dealing with on the planet right now. So when I come across to every problem in my world, I now speak the truth. Do you understand the level of discipline that requires? To every problem in my world, I speak the truth. To every set of circumstances that are vying to seduce me into a lie of lack and limitation, of separation, I speak the truth. That is the way I have produced the greatest results in my life, when I operate with that level of discipline. It requires something. Yesterday, I sent out an email, and I said, yesterday marks 40 days till my 40th birthday. And I said, I'm going to make a devotional practice of the next 40 days, because 40 is a very powerful number. 40 indicates preparation, and it indicates the birth of new consciousness. If you remember, about 6 months ago, I declared before you that I was going to release 40 pounds by my 40th birthday. And I've released 32, and I have 39 days. It will be done. Not because 185 pounds is better than whatever 40 pounds plus that is to 25. But because I knew that I was carrying stuff around that was not of my highest service. And so part of my amplification of the next 40 days is to be in a disciplined practice. And for me, what that looks like is releasing refined sugar, which I had done in the first 4 months, and that was what helped a lot, and releasing alcohol. And you know, I love some red wine. But some things are more important than my little desires. Who I'm here on the planet to be is more important than a great glass of red wine. So I don't know what your version of that is. I don't know what it is that you are being called to release in this season, but there is an invitation from the soul of humanity. There is an invitation from the consciousness of humanity. You are part of the body of God. You are part of the body of God. You know, we always talk, God is not some man in the sky pulling the puppet strings of your life. It is the presence of all that is. It is that which is in back of all things. And it comes through from the unseen, from the unmanifest, into the manifest. It pushes through. And you are the filtration system. So is your filter clean or is it clogged? There's a lot of clogged filters on this planet right now. When we each do our part to clean out our system, we contribute not only to our individual experience, but to the collective consciousness of humanity. Chicago is the way Chicago is because of you. The United States of America is the way it is because of you. Planet Earth is the way it is because of you. Now, you can hear that and get defensive, or you can hear that and get excited. Wow, you mean the power is right where I am? Yes, that's exactly what I mean. So my talk today is titled Radically Loving. You know, the notion of the word radical is to have a dramatic change, to have an extreme shift. How will you be radically loving? How will you move on the planet such that you drop the God consciousness and realign everyone and everything around you to the truth? Will you be disciplined like that? Look, if we have a community of 1,000 people, that's what we say we have, a community of 1,000 people. I told you this a couple weeks ago. The final talk that Ernest Holmes gave was called The Sermon by the Sea. And he went through a whole list of things. He said if 1,000 people got on board with this philosophy to rigorously practice oneness, to dissolve the seduction of duality, the consciousness of humanity would be healed. We have 1,000 people. It just requires a practice. I come here because when I forget, you remind me. You know, the challenging thing about having a conversation with your brother on Facebook the Saturday before you're supposed to give a talk called Radically Loving is if you have any degree of integrity, you have to confront yourself. I know I'm in this role because I would try to get away with all kinds of nonsense. I'm in this role so that it's out. So do you put yourself in places and spaces that require your integrity? Or do you play a small game such that you can get away with a bunch of nonsense? I'm asking you to make a radical shift. I'm asking you to be a body of human beings that radically alter the way you do life. In the Science of Mind, it says love is the self-givingness of the spirit, expressing itself in terms of creation, a cosmic force whose sweep is irresistible. To be radically loving would be to invite a devotional practice, a partnership with a cosmic force whose sweep is irresistible. It is very easy to look at the set of circumstances in Parkland, to look at the set of circumstances in Orlando, to look at the set of circumstances in Ferguson. There are circumstances right where you are. And until we get our side of the street clean, nothing in the world of form will change. So the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said it in one of his final talks. He said, "A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death." Remember I said it's mathematics. It's just a formula. We can alter what we put in the formula at any moment. And that which we put in will come out. If you look scripturally, what is spiritual death? Spiritual death is the separation from God. It's the separation from life. Remember, Rumi started us out by saying, if I set my heart on anything but you, beloved, let fire burn me from inside. Fire is a symbol of love. Let fire burn me from inside. Wake me up, please. Burn that which is untrue and ignite that which is real. There is something in each of us, an aliveness and arousal that is available. When there are aspects of us that are dead and dormant, they get twisted. That's why that song was created. Let's talk about sex. Bring it out of the closet. Bring it out of an area of suppression. Bring it out to be healed. Because if we are unwilling to look at a thing, it cannot shift. If we are unwilling to look at our addiction to violence, it will not shift. We are addicted to the lie of separation. And it would behoove each of us to be in a devotional practice that unravels that thing. It is insidious. It is subtle. But it is transformable. So, when I am unclear, I just go to texts that are straight truth. That's all I know to do. When my mind is foggy, that's why I get quiet. There's a long list of texts that are going to be on our website in the next couple of weeks because I get gazillions of emails asking me for book lists. And I'm the crazy one that does my best to respond to each one rather than having one list on the website. Like, oh, there's an unconscious commitment to make life hard. That's interesting. Our lives are woven together by things like that. But I'll close with this. The essence of love pervades everything. It fires the heart. It stimulates the emotions. It renews the soul and proclaims the spirit. You are part of the body of God. There is the individual self, and there is the collective self. May we each do what it takes to burn out anything unlike the beloved in each of us. May we each bring forward the most generous, kind, compassionate version of self. When we begin to create systems and structures that are designed with the primary intention of social upliftment rather than destruction and defense, the world will change. That is fascinating. So you can get mad, and then what? And then what? I'm a subject matter expert in the field of consciousness. There's something that you are a subject matter expert in. And there is a unique gift that you're here to bring on the planet that disrupts the psychosis of fear. You're interested in that, is why you're here. And if we all come together in communities to hide out without doing the deep work of deconstruction, then we perpetuate more of the same. So, if you feel called to join me in these next 40 days, I invite you to do that. To go into a devotional practice of 40 days such that you may end up, if you were to start today, it would be March 30th. My birthday's March 29th. Anyway, but if you were to start today, it'd be 40 days of a devotional practice. Figure out what is yours to cleanse, to release from your consciousness, and what is yours to embrace to be the most powerful version of you on the planet. We can shift the world of form in a nanosecond if we're devoted.